Hello, dear audience. I hope you're fine. I'm very fine. And since we discussed chapter 9, I'm now coming to chapter 10. And I'm welcoming you to subscribe to my channel, Edutainment for Us, and raise the concerns and questions you have about Fathers of Nations. I hope you're also following on Parliament of Owls and the Samaritan, as well as an artist of the floating word and other literary analysis aspects. Now today I'm going to cover chapter 10 and I'm beginning with the synopsis. Now this is a chapter that involves Fiona who has shortly been engaged by the VOA. She receives the youth's call when she arrives at the office. This boy, Nick, tells her that she has to know something about the silent listener. The silent listener, which Fiona thinks is an ugly, big gadget, turns out to be a very beautiful, small gadget, and which is no longer monstrous as Fiona expected. Nick reveals that it's used to harvest information, possibly that which suspects risky or dangerous aspects within any setting. The youth fits its antenna on the window of the office and checks from time to time to get possible information that is showing any danger using the global positioning system. The gadget is able to specify information from Simon Hotel, and there is this information about one person who is controlling 4 individuals, that is Kimani, Melusi, Chamaka, and Tahir. And this is a possibly anonymous individual who calls himself Guy. Now, what do we get to when after this? We see a conversation that seems troubling because why did the GPS choose on this? It is because it mentions something to do with the rules. Nick also targets some information which mentions a stupid boss from Fiona. Remember in that chapter when she was called and she said that leaving Abiola? Yeah. Now, Fiona gets to the hotel and appears to arrive just when Long Tadway is raising a complaint over the dysfunctional air conditioning system. The receptionist later attends to Fiona but refuses to call Abiola. She tells her to call her herself. Now, Fiona knocks at Longway's door to indicate that there is some documents that he left or dropped at the desk. We realize that this is a tactic possibly because what does Longway say? Longway says, I did not leave any documents. Fiona insists, and through her scheming aspect, she makes sure that she meets him. We finally see that Fiona gets to Abiola's room just after he has called the 4 visitors and asks him about Mr. Long Tadway. Abiola reveals that he is the guide and he intends to ensure that Path Alpha gets to the platform just as Way Omega is. Abiola is mesmerized that Fiona is giving some information hinting that Nick has a silent listener that is able to connect or inform all this. Now let's get to the thematic concerns with this within this chapter. We will start with the first theme, which is technology. I believe you've heard me mention about the air conditioning system that was in the hotel, and Long Tadway had complained to the secretary that it was not functioning. We also see on page 126 up to 132 that Nick talks about this silent listener that is supposed to be fit on the GPS system to allow the operations and establishing dangerous information that is possibly risky. And we see him drawing a chart to show how this information is got. The operation of the silent listener is also enhanced by the computer and programs as mentioned on page 127. Now, I also see another theme of change and transition. And when we look at this, we realize that Lagos has grown. The author mentions that the population has risen from less than a million inhabitants to more than 50 million. Imagine that. That is shown on page 137. Now let's get to character and characterization, and I'll start a discussion on Fiona. Fiona is a very inquisitive character, as if you check keenly in this chapter, she keeps asking Nick a lot of questions about the gadget, how it operates, how the silent listener harvests information, and all that. She also asks Abiola why he intends to move and work for Path Alpha, when at first he was serving for Way Omega. She asks him about the four the strangers who are communicating with one person in the name of the guide. That is page 136. She's quite scheming and manipulative and in some way tactful. Why do I say so? When you look at page 138 up to 139, you realize that she uses, some tact to get information from Abiola. She reveals that Nick already has information about a guide, and through that, Abiola willingly gives information. She's also tactful because when Longway tells her to leave, she tells him, "This is Gambia, and you can imagine losing your documents," and that makes it possible for her to get to Longway, as shown on page 137. She's quite observant and keen because she notices that the receptionist has eyes that move from one person to the other, as indicated on page 134. She's also quite doubtful and skeptical because she does not believe that in any way the silent listener can do what Nick is actually sharing. Now, I can get to Nick because he's a great character here, and we see that he's quite devoted and committed to his work. You can see how he takes time explaining about the silent listener and the GPS and how it harvests information, even though we see that Fiona is not interested, but she engages her more and more until she gets to understand how it operates. When he suspects that something happened at the hotel, you can see he quickly trapped information about the guide and the four strangers. He also trapped information on Fiona, who was calling boss stupid. He's quite knowledgeable. The way he's manipulating around with the system shows that he's aware of the technical jargon he's using, also proves that, as shown on page 130. We also have to talk about the Tad Longway. Tad Longway is a great character here, and therefore we cannot forget about him. He's quite sarcastic. You remember the time Fiona was calling and telling him that he has left some document. What does he say? He says, "All right, so you're a Gambian. Well, I'm a South African. Now, how has that helped to advance world peace?" as shown on page 136. He's also very sarcastic when talking to the receptionist that she cannot remember her complaint, as shown on page 184. He is described as a grumpy man who sounds grumpier when he returns the wrong keys to the receptionist, and he tosses the envelope back to her, as shown on page 134. That as well shows that Tad Longway is ill-tempered or temperamental. He's quite annoyed that the receptionist is not sorting him out. He's also annoyed that Fiona is interrupting him, as shown on page 133. He's also doubtful because when Longway suspects that the room he's given even the second time is not functional, and when he brings the wrong key that is given and told that he's now getting the right room, what does he say? He says it had better be, because he does not believe that he's been given the right key, as shown on page 133 and 134. I'll finalize with language and stylistic devices. I'll begin with rhetorical questions. Look at page 136. You will see this rhetorical question: who thought of Portugal whenever people mention Lagos? Mackenzie wonders, might she be the answer they were looking for? That is page 132. We see more styles such as imagery. I always like using imagery and figurative language because most students do not have ability to express this when asked. Now we have a metaphor on page 127. Nick calls the gadget the goddess. You can see that it's actually not. Personification. Nick says that the computer tells it what to save on page 127. We have hyperbole. Page 129, Nick comments that he has not yet explained, but Fiona is sweating blood. We see simile. Fiona checks Nick's gadget and thinks it looked like a refrigerator, as shown on page 126. We can also see that she also thinks that the gadget is smooth like a rich woman's safe, a deposit box, which is complicated gadgetry. That is page 127. And then on page 129, the lines run outward from the circle to the 4 other circles, like the spokes for the hub of the wheel. We have a lot of vivid description also. I'm sure if you check from the text, you'll see the description of this silent listener as an ugly monster with spilling cables. That's what her imagination was. And actually what she sees later, that it was a small gadget that looked like a rich woman's safe. The youth himself, Nick, rises from the chair lifting his lanky self, and then in the mall installments, this process goes on until he reaches to his full 6 feet and 8 inches as shown on page 126. We have a lot of dialogue and conversation in this part. Like Nick talks to Fiona explaining about the silent listener, and Fiona also responds, like doubting and inquiring here and there, as shown on page 126 up to 128. Another dialogue happens between Longway and Fiona when she is informing him that he has left the documents and he's suspecting that she's just making fun of him. We have another dialogue between Longway and the receptionist when he's coming to complain about the air conditioner, the room, and grumbling. And the receptionist tries to respond as shown on page 136 and 137. Then Fiona and Abiola finally have a conversation why he wants to shift from way omega to path alpha and the reason behind all that. It's also we also see a style of irony. It's ironical that from the imagination of Fiona, that silent listener would be an ugly monster with parts spilling, cables spilling out of the ears. In reality, what does she see? She sees something shiny, new, and sleek device and compact. That is on page 126. We have idiophons like tap and aha on page 129 and 132 respectively. We have idioms such as she fished out another small envelope on page 134. We have what's your poison, page 137. Don't go burn yourself, page 137. Then we have onomatopoeia. You can check throughout the chapter. You see words like nodded, grabbed, exploded, screamed, shouted, grumbled, sparkling, grumbling, sitting, grasping. So if you have any other aspects for chapter 10, you can share. Feel free to share. And I think the important thing here is, does this discussion really benefit you? Does it add value? Does it open your view about Fathers of Nation? Because this is a new book, but quite interesting, a political book that is, teaches us a lot and reflects what the society is all about. Bye for now, and I hope that when I'll be going to chapter 11, we'll be jumping in with you, and I hope that you are my consistent follower who has the bell, the notification bell is on, and therefore whenever I post a video, you should be the first to see, and you should be the first to critique and add value, so that we continue pushing this wheel of education with us. Thank you.